As I'm sure you can tell by watching and listening to this, I opted for the video essay option of this project instead of the long essay. For this video essay, I wanted to analyze the Mise-en-scene in one of my favorite films from this course, Looking for Mr. Goodbar. The film, directed by Richard Brooks, was an edgy drama released in 1977. Looking for Mr. Goodbar shows the protagonist, Teresa Dunn, played by the wonderful Miss Diane Keaton, struggle with her double life, half of which is the good Christian teacher who wants to help her students succeed and focuses more on family life and being a good person, and the other half, which is a drug-addicted sex addict who prostitutes herself and lives in misery. The mise-en-scene of this film helps to reflect the contrast in her life by allowing different locations to represent differences in her personality. The most obvious aspect to the duality of Teresa's life is the lighting throughout the film. Lighting in different scenes sets up foreshadowing of what the place is going to represent and who Teresa is going to be in said place. To break it down broadly, light means good, ideal, control, rules, and dark, on the other hand, means vulnerability, danger, badness, threats, disorganization. To further categorize, I'm going to split these contrasts into two distinct categories of dark and light scenes. The scenes that are associated with light and brightness are held in the daytime for the most part, which of course is very fitting. The three most notable places are Catherine, Teresa's sister's apartment, which is bright, clean, and organized. The Dunn house, which is Teresa's parents' house, which shows symbols of Christian faith, cleanliness, and family. And of course, the classroom, which has happy children, toys, organization, and bright, happy colors. In all of these scenes, the prominent colors are blues, greens, yellows, and other very bright colors that are more saturated than the rest of the film. The dark scenes are primarily in nightclubs and bars, which are dirty, loud, and very threatening, and Teresa's apartment, which is full of roaches, drugs, sex, and disorganization. Obviously, these scenes are primarily held at night. The most primary colors featured in these scenes are blacks, browns, and variations of other muted tones. These scenes are primarily set at night, as I said previously, which was an easy way to add to the contrast the mise-en-scene, which obviously helps to exemplify the theme of a double night with the contrast of day and night. In a journal article by Charles Forceville and Renckens, which was called The Good is Light and Bad is Dark, Metaphor in Feature Films, which will be cited in the description below, darkness and light are used as a metaphor for good and bad. Good and bad is explored through many feature films, which obviously it is a well-known fact that darkness and light are explored in all forms of media as symbols of good and bad. But with regards to film in particular, there are added elements, specifically in the mise-en-scene, that allow for the ideas of darkness and light to be exemplified and played upon in creative, less obvious ways than, say, a book, which can only use description, not literal images and sound, would be able to do. According to the article, light is critical for the mise-en-scene because without literal lighting on the set, the camera would not be able to pick up anything. It would just be a black screen. Aside from literal light sources, general set pieces like dark or light clothing or dark or light curtains can be used as elements to symbolize good and bad. In Looking for Mr. Goodbar, it is apparent by the props and set design which scenes were meant to be dark or bad and which scenes were meant to be light or good. Obviously, the classroom and the Dunn house show bright colors and there is no dirt and everything is very organized. They show symbols of family and Christianity. It gives viewers a sense of calm as everything seems to be nicely put in their place. In the dark, however, aside from dark colors and wardrobe, there are literal insects crawling around in these scenes at Teresa's house and the nightclubs. There's also loud-looking lights that are jarring to viewers and images of things that are seen as dirty or deviant like sex and drugs. This article explores examples of films like Apocalypse Now, which we also watched this semester, that also use darkness and light to exemplify good and bad. Without getting too far into the article, I would like to give one of the examples it gave, where Apocalypse Now demonstrated how darkness and light contrast. Darkness in Apocalypse Now in the scene with the cell allows for viewers to feel as though Willard, who is in the cell, is in the dark mentally or bad, and that Kurt, who is outside of the prison cell, is enlightened or good. This sort of thing directly relates to looking for Mr. Goodbar's protagonist, Teresa, as her dual personalities match with the mise-en-scene always. Teresa in the light is good and enlightened, and Teresa in the dark is bad and ignorant. In contrast to this idea, one of the major set pieces of the film is in Teresa's professor's office. When looking at these scenes, it is obvious that the office does not fit into a single category of dark and light. But there are events that happen here that would seem like it should happen in either darkness or light. While this location seems like it may undermine the entire argument, it does quite the contrary, because the office is the place where accepted and deviant events happen. Therefore, the mise-en-scene and lighting changes with what is happening to Teresa at the time. The scene is dark when Teresa is having sex with her professor, which is seen as a deviant or bad act. However, if you look closely, the only light in that part of the scene is on Teresa's face, symbolizing good, in my opinion, as she has control of the situation, which is something that she rarely has in dark scenes such as her apartment or the nightclubs. In scenes of her apartment, it seems like she has control, but ultimately she is more vulnerable in them, as we see in the conclusion of the film. Also, in one of the brighter scenes in the office, Teresa gives her professor a gift, wrapped in bright blue paper. She is wearing green and the background of her is bright yellow. However, in contrast, the professor is wearing all black and behind him is a cluttered desk and a dark bookshelf. This singular scene's mise-en-scene allows for the symbolism of darkness and light and the dualities of the movie to be seen in a single instance, which makes the office all the more important to the movie, as the professor somewhat symbolizes deviant acts as he is always in the dark, and Teresa, at least in this instance, is still good and symbolizes goodness and light as she is always in the light part of the scenes with her professor. Overall, the mise-en-scene throughout the film allows viewers to fully understand the dualities of Teresa as well as many other characters, as when they are in the dark, they are deviant, bad creatures, and when they are in the light, they are basically like rays of sunshine and goodness. The roles of contrasting mise-en-scene affects Teresa in particular, as she is the protagonist. She experiences more contrast in her settings, which directly affects the contrast of her actions in her personality. In the light, she is a good person who helps others. She is in control and follows the rules. In the dark, she is deviant. She is vulnerable. And it ultimately leads to her demise, as she can never escape the darkness of her room nor her life.